Well, welcome, mothers and others. I'm so excited to bring you a couple of new people to our webinars today. We actually have two people who are part of the Texas 9, and there are 9 of these folks that are running for office that all teamed up together to work together to help focus on changing Texas, and especially in their area of Texas. And I'm sure Titus will tell us a little bit more about the Texas 9 and why they decided to group together. So today we're going to meet Titus Benton. So welcome.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yes. So Titus, let's just start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Texas 9 and why you all formed a group together this fall to kind of just work together on this election?
Sure. Yeah. So it started with, I'm in Senate District 17, and I was acquainted with Josh Tutt, who is in Senate District 18. And we were just having a conversation about being candidates in districts where we're going up against Republican incumbents. Many of us are in really tough districts, plus 10 or more Republican districts. And just some of the challenges that come with that, getting your name out there, raising money, all the normal stuff. And so just before the state convention, I sent an email to all of the candidates. There are more than 9, but I sent an email to everybody and just asked, hey, would you guys be willing to work together? I know campaigns are different, strategies are different. We're all over the state, but we're all running for the state Senate. We know that if we flip 4 seats, the balance of power in the Senate would change. And we know the Senate is where a lot of the lawmaking that happens in the state is where it either stops, gets a red light, or gets a green light. So felt that was really important. It started really as a fundraising effort, a joint Act Blue that we put together. And then when we met at the convention, it was like, hey, we could probably do a little more. So social media accounts started, things like that. And it's really helped get all of our names out there more so. And I hope really brought a unified tone to the conversation around us as Democrats in sort of our attempt to bring more reason and more compassion and more justice to the Texas legislature.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So just tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you are running for office.
Yeah, well, so the short version of that is grew up in Southern Missouri, lovely community, lovely church family, great family. Went off to Bible college, became a youth minister, studied theology, moved to Texas to work at a church 11 years ago, started getting frustrated with sort of Christian nationalism is what we would call it now. Also with just looking at my community and going, I'm helping people one at a time, helping this teenager with this problem, which is all valuable. But I saw big systemic issues and how do you fix those? So I started a nonprofit, started working in vulnerable communities all around the world. That turned into some full-time jobs. I'm now the chief operating officer at United Against Human Trafficking in Houston. But then after the Trump election, after a lot of my friends, people that I grew up with, a lot of mentors, in my mind, just kind of lost their way. I thought I got to do something. And so the real inflection point for me was when George Floyd was murdered. And I heard my friends of color talking about how they weren't being listened to, understood, whatever. So I finally just decided, like, I've got to do something more. And I've always been interested in politics, but fairly uninvolved. And I just started running toward the problems that I saw. So I decided to run. And I chose the state Senate for the reason I mentioned earlier. This is a deliberative body that makes a lot of Texas politics churn. We talk a lot about how the lieutenant governor is actually the most powerful person in Texas politics. That is true. And he controls the Senate agenda. So until we see that balance of power change in the Senate, we're going to keep getting the same old stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I chose this particular race.
That's great. Yeah, and you're totally right. I mean, until we have some change, especially with Dan Patrick, and we kind of change up some of these things, we're not going to see change, especially considering how gerrymandered Texas is right now. Yep. So you are a former pastor, and you were the founder of a group called the 25 Group. And can you tell us a little bit more about what the 25 Group does?
Yeah. So what we did is we saw a real need with groups that were working overseas, spending a lot of time doing really worthwhile stuff in tough communities. But then they were having to come back to America and raise money and spend a bunch of time raising money instead of doing the work that they were good at doing. So I knew a lot of these folks from lots of different corners of my life. And I just said, hey, we're going to start an organization. We're going to raise money, and then we're just going to give away grants every year to these organizations, take capital projects off of their hands, fund new programs so they wouldn't have to come back to the States and raise money for that funding. So we started in 2014. That was our very first year. Raised all the money online, sort of a crowdfunding sort of experience on social media. That year, we raised enough money to fund a nutrition project in the Dominican Republic. We helped build a school building in a village in India. We bought like 100,000 vitamins or something, a year's worth of vitamins for some nutrition centers. And we drilled a water well in India also. Every year since then, different set of projects, but same idea. I've turned that over to some staff that we had hired while I was there. And they're running that full time, but it's still going strong and they're still doing the same kind of stuff.
That's really incredible. I'm so
Yeah,
impressed.
thanks.
Wow. I
Yeah,
mean, that
thank you.
really, I always commend people who are, they walk the walk of Jesus, as I say it, because that really is the good walk. So
Thanks for saying that. Yeah,
yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
it.
that's really impressive. Can you tell us a little bit tell us a little bit about District 17? Like where does it run? How many count? I mean, right now it's like, honestly, we're so gerrymandered. Where is your area besides like everywhere, probably?
Yeah, by the way, I'm running against the Senate chair of redistricting, Joan Huffman, who drew this district I'm about to tell you for her electoral advantage. And I just think people should choose their politicians, not the other way around. So it's River Oaks in Houston, where the senator lives, thin strip of Harris County straight west, thin strip of Fort Bend County straight south, and then it empties into southern Brazoria County, Wharton County, Matagorda County, Jackson County, Colorado County, and a little bit of eastern Waller County. So parts are all of 8 different counties.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I know, all over the place, a little bit here, a little bit there.
It was some
Seems like,
creative drawing for sure. Yeah.
right, right. I always like those districts that are like, they're either like a crescent moon or they're a donut,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
this, or a half a donut.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep.
okay,
Exactly.
so let's talk about Huffman. So you're running against Huffman, who has repeatedly, over and over again, been voted as one of the worst Texas legislators in Texas by Texas Monthly. And he was actually voted as the world's, or not the world, well, maybe the world, but the worst senator as well. So just tell us a little bit about him, and then tell us about what your platform is and what you believe in and what you would like to do if you were elected into office.
Sure. So Joan was elected in 2009 for the first time. So that gives her a 13-year incumbency. She, like to your point, has been voted one of the worst legislators ever. I think there's 2 or 3 years the Texas Monthly has done that, and she's in there every year. I think my deal with Senator Huffman, and I'm not the kind of guy that gets personal, that objectifies, that's going to make fun of her or whatever. It's not the point. The point is, what are the results, right? And for me, she is complicit in going along with Abbott's agenda, Patrick's agenda. When you look at her voting record, it's true in every instance. She doesn't seem to stick up for her constituents. And she just kind of goes along. It's a great way to politically survive. It's a really bad way to love your neighbor and serve your community and represent the people that put you there. My big deal is healthcare. She's been in there the whole time we've had the opportunity to expand Medicaid and hasn't done so on her watch, and now representing largely a rural district. A couple of dozen rural hospitals have closed because of that failure to expand Medicaid, and that's just going to continue, as we know. When I think about education, She hasn't fully funded education. In fact, our ranking and funding per pupil has gone down during her time in office. In addition to that, she's never given our retired teachers a cost of living adjustment. So we're going on 18 years since they got their last adjustment. She's been in there 13 of those years, hasn't done anything for our retired teachers, hasn't raised the minimum wage. For me, we've got to raise wages in our state. The argument I always get is, well, nobody pays the minimum wage anymore anyway, which is true. But if it were true, then why not just codify that in the law and raise the minimum wage and give everybody a livable wage? She hasn't acted on any of those things. And then some of the things she has acted on, permitless carry, 6-week ban, the trigger law with abortion, she's in favor of all of those things. And, I just really kind of disagree with her on every point. And I think elections are contests of ideas. And so what I've been doing is traveling the district, all 8 counties, meeting with as many people as I can, telling them what I stand for, who I stand for, why I'm running. And while a lot of people don't think out in those rural areas I have much chance, I grew up in a rural area, and I know when you show up, people tend to trust you. If you don't show up, they tend not to. And so I'm trying to show up, talk with folks, listen to what they need, understand their pain points, and address those through legislation.
Yeah, that's right. So I spoke this weekend to the Texas Rural Caucus, and it was great. I had such a good time meeting so many of these folks, and they have a lot of serious concerns. So, what are the concerns that you're seeing from rural Texas in your district?
Yeah. Oh, there are several. We're going to rank maybe the top 3. One is in the next legislative session. There is no question. They've made it clear. They've telegraphed the path for us. They're going for vouchers finally. Now, I think the Senate is going to go strong there. I think there's some Republicans in the House that represent rural areas that are still a little fuzzy on it, but they're going to go hard. And when I talk to folks, whether they're teachers or just parents of kids that don't have other options for schooling, those schools are already underfunded. Many of those schools are very old. Many of those schools already have teacher shortages. And so vouchers are a terrifying prospect for them because we know that money is going to just further cause them to struggle. And so that's one. I think another one is we have to think about infrastructure, whether it's rural broadband, whether it's flood protection, some of the development that's going on that is pushing more and more population out. Property taxes are going up. People are really concerned kind of about that set of things as well. Wharton, where I was yesterday, lost hundreds of homes and thousands of businesses during Harvey because the Colorado River comes right through Wharton. And so that town was heavily impacted. Loss of population since then because people have chosen not to move back because they're afraid it's going to happen again. And they're right about that. So those are a few of the things that when I'm out there talking to folks, but then there's the other things that like it impacts everybody. Healthcare, as already mentioned, is huge. Wages and good jobs are another. We've got great opportunities with alternative energy to provide really high paying jobs in these communities. And that's something that I think we need to look at for sure. And then when you talk about the needs of our kids and our families, we talk about gun safety. Even the people that are sort of characterized as rural, gun-loving people that hunt and do the whole thing, they're still concerned about safety. And when you get in front of normal people and you're just talking, you get off the internet, they're concerned too. Even the gun enthusiasts are concerned about what's going on around gun safety in schools. And so those are things that are kind of popping up as well.
Yeah. So I just had a fundraiser webinar right before I came on here, and we had it with Kim Olson and Vicki Goodwin, Representative Vicki Goodwin, and Senator Roland Gutierrez from the Uvalde area. And we were talking about mental health and healthcare, and especially mental health and healthcare in rural Texas.
Yep.
And we were talking about how many people commit suicide in rural Texas because there are not good mental health facilities or help nearby. So are you seeing the same effects happening like where you live? Because I know in West Texas, they're seeing that. And I don't know, maybe from your experience from your work and stuff, maybe what have you seen?
Yeah. the same thing, unfortunately. When I was in Wharton yesterday, I had lunch with a great couple. I'd actually met them at a Beto rally in El Campo, and the wife is in mental health care. And she is the only person in a 2-county region that provides case management for juveniles. And she kind of gets the worst cases. But she talked to me at length about how she has this roster of families that need services, and there are no services there. She does her homework. She finds services in Fort Bend County or closer into Houston, but they can't afford the transportation back and forth. Things like equine therapy or art therapy, or these alternative therapies that are proven to be really impactful. She just can't get access. And we talked at length about how even expanding Medicaid would help her in her work. It's not just a rural problem. It's a problem everywhere. In my work as a youth pastor, I work with teenagers all the time. And I hate to say it, but I think it's such a multifaceted issue. We don't have time to peel that whole onion. But when you look at all the statistics around how connected we are to one another, and yet how lonely people feel. I mean, it's something like 70+% of people say they feel lonely some or almost all of the time. It's an incredible number. We've got teenagers and we've got adults too, really struggling with mental health. And as the state that funds mental health dead last across the country, the fact that we haven't been more proactive around this issue, particularly when we want to evoke mental health as the reason for some of our other problems, then why aren't we investing in that kind of care? And when I talked to Danny yesterday, she was like, we're not investing. She's not getting rich. She can't find services. They can't even supplement her clients' travel to the services that do exist because they're just not funded at a high enough level. So we got a ton of work to do in that space.
Yeah. So what else are you seeing like on the ground in your district where Democrats, what should we be doing as far as like messaging to districts like yours? Where can we be making some improvements? How do we reach these people? Because we have to win them over. And the thing is that in my opinion, which I have a lot of opinions, I'm Latina, so I'm full of opinions, but it just happens. But I just, my opinion is that right now, there is no reason why Democrats should not be winning across the state, because the Republicans have failed over and over and over again at everything. I mean, they're not doing policies, they're failing Texans left and right. But where they are winning is that they message on everyone's inner fears. So we have to find ways to change that. So I want to just ask you, like, what are you seeing that is working? What can we do better as far as messaging for districts like yours? And what are you seeing on the ground as you're out on the campaign trail?
Yeah, great question. And I know who I'm on the call with right here, doing a phenomenal job of messaging. I should be asking you that question because you all are crushing it, particularly online, with really well done videos. And they're different. I mean, the name of this organization is Mothers Against, right? So there's an oppositional quality to it. But again, these are contests of ideas. So I'm not so much against oppositional language or messaging, but to your point, the fear mongering is the only strategy that I'm seeing from most Republican candidates. And my line on that is always, if you have to tell somebody who to fear to get them to follow you, then you're not a very good leader, because that's not what leadership is. That's what a terrorist does. I mean, that's not leadership. And so when it comes to messaging, I think we have to be very clear about the distinctives, not only in our policy, but also in our process. And that's one of the reasons I decided to run, and one of the reasons that I'm running the way that I'm running, trying to levy a really positive campaign, but one that doesn't back away from the truth of the differences between Joan Huffman and me, because there are vast differences. The other thing I would say about messaging, and this is a critique of my own side, is that it doesn't matter how good a messaging you have if you're not out there getting the message out. And Democrats have to be honest that of the 9 of us that have sort of banded together, there are, I think, 5 or 6 uncontested Senate races in the state of Texas. There's no Democratic candidate. When I'm out in rural Texas as a Democrat, standing up in front of groups of people, I'm usually the only Democratic candidate there. Janet Dudding was down yesterday at an event I was at. We did have a House candidate there yesterday at that event. That was the first time I'd met him. And other than statewide, I've seen Janet a lot, by the way. She's all over my district, so she's working hard. But we're not out there. And I think we've got to be honest about the fact that Democrats sort of fled rural Texas a long time ago. And when I got into this race, I always heard we're going to flip Texas blue, demographics. Once the population changes more, it'll flip blue. A few more years, it's going to flip blue. I've heard this over and over and over again. And my point to my fellow candidates is it's going to flip blue when we figure out how to reach rural Texas again, because we abandoned it. And we've got to be honest about that fact. There are a ton of groups that have re-engaged in the last couple of cycles, and I think that's good. But that's the key to me. If you have a killer message, but you're not there to deliver your message, you're not going to get anywhere. We've got to get out in these small towns. So that's one of the reasons why, even though the district's so gerrymandered and it's ridiculous how it's been sliced up, I actually loved it, and it made me want to run more because it brought in all these rural communities, and I just love being out there.
Wow, that's great. That's really interesting. I love the insight that you have there. It's kind of interesting. There are a few trends that I'm starting to see amongst a bunch of us Democrats. And you all who are listening, you may have seen some of it, you may not have seen some of it, but here's the deal. Like right from the beginning, when I formed Mothers Against Greg Abbott, right from the beginning, I talked about we need to learn how to talk to each other. We need to learn how to reach the other side. We need to learn how to reach those independents and the moderate Republicans, the ones that are not happy with the way things are going right now in Texas, because I really feel like we have a lot more in common with them. And then also right now, just to let everybody know, the Republican Party is split, right? I mean, they don't even like each other, hardly any of them even like each other because, I guess when you have that many egos in the room, you have Sid Miller, who doesn't like Greg Abbott, you have Dan Patrick, who doesn't like Greg Abbott, you have Ken Paxton, who isn't liked by anybody, but somehow he's like the necessary evil at the table all the time. It's a really bad situation. You have all of these people that are playing, and they don't even like each other. So, one of the things that's been really impressive to me, and as you formed your Texas 9 group, is that a bunch of you guys are campaigning together. Like you see it with the Texas slate, and you know what? You all like each other, and that matters. You all like each other. You're getting along. You're sharing the stage space in a year where it's kind of hard to share space with Beto O'Rourke. I mean, he does take up a lot of oxygen in the room sometimes. Yeah. So it's really important. You guys have to work extra hard in election cycles like this in order to have basically be seen.
Yep.
So it's really hard, but what I do see is I see you guys working really hard, and I do see that you all like each other a whole lot, and that you're working really hard as a team, and sharing information and that sort of thing. So that really is very impressive. So I'm very impressed with you, Titus, and you and your whole entire team, because I think that's going to be the difference with this election. And we know we're not going to win all of the races, but what we can do is we can lessen the margin in which the Republicans win by, and we can keep on chipping away at their margins, because sooner or later we're just going to take over, because they are the party of no policy. When your policy is hate, there is no policy like that. That doesn't bring people together. Doesn't make people want to vote for you. That sort of thing. Yeah. So, I just met with Senator Gutierrez, and he said, what are some things that you can do? Well, he also has a rural Texas area, and he brought up and how broadband and the need for broadband has really affected his area of rural Texas. So my question to you is, how has technology and advances in technology and the fact that rural Texas does not have broadband, how has that affected the area in District 17?
Yeah, great question. I was actually talking to some folks about that yesterday because that hadn't come up on its own as I talked to voters a ton. I think the reality is because I'm entirely east of I-35. I don't think the pain point around rural broadband is quite as strong. There are still communities that don't have it, but Wharton's 8,000 people, El Campo's 12,000 people, Bay City's almost 20,000 people, 18, 20,000 people. So they've got more service. Lake Jackson's the same way. Then certainly Senator Gutierrez's neighborhoods would. But I think what everybody feels is this shift in the divide between urban and rural, and a lot of resources going to urban that don't go to rural. And I kind of get the sense that these towns, which are, to me, I mean, those are big towns based on where I grew up. But to me, they're looking at it and going, "Hey, don't forget about us here. All this Harvey money that needs to be shared. Don't forget us about our small towns." When you start talking about other points of infrastructure with roads or the grid, they're feeling those pain points maybe more so than a lot of urban areas. And so as we sort of rush ahead in technological development, we tend to think about how that benefits these huge cities, and there's merit to that, but we can't leave these small towns behind. And I think to your point earlier about Democrats in rural areas, we've got to help them understand that, Republicans in rural areas, we've got to help them understand that they're voting against their interests, right? They're following sort of the cultural script, the fear-mongering script, but when you start talking about flooding or power or rural broadband or high-paying jobs, they're voting against their interests when they vote for Republicans. And we've just got to pound that again and again and again.
Yeah. So how do you think women's rights has impacted this fall election in your area of rural Texas?
My sense is that it's huge. I kind of went into it thinking, wondering how much different it would be out in rural areas. But I think this is one of those issues where particularly independent women are flocking to Beto, because when he talks about women's rights, he talks about it in a very convincing way. It's a very genuine way. And it's also this idea that the Republican Party claims to be this party of small government, but in the most intimate ways is exerting power over bodily autonomy, which makes no consistent sense when it comes to their political philosophy. And so regardless of where I am, whether I'm in Spring Branch, which is heavily populated, or I'm out in southern Brazoria County, which is not, I went to a pro-choice rally in Angleton, which is the county seat of Brazoria County, but not an enormous town. And the organizer thought she might get 50 people to show up. They were going to march to the congressman's office. And so a few speakers got up, we marched, but there were over 300 people there.
Wow.
The next day, I went to Richmond, which is a growing area, but historically a very old town, a small town, a conservative town. Again, there were a couple hundred people at that rally. And so I think it is energizing women everywhere. And I think I've also met people who, if you really pinned them down, they would say, "Hey, abortion's not a choice I would make, not even a choice I would really agree with, but I don't get to say what somebody else chooses." And as you can imagine, this is a question I get all the time, having been a pastor. And I've got this is the one issue where I get told by my old friends that I've lost it and I'm going to hell. But I'm like, guys, your values don't represent everyone else's values. This is about choice. It's about bodily autonomy, not to mention how complicated of a subject it is. when it comes to in Texas having no exception for rape, incest, and even though there is allowance for preserving the life of the mother for there to be an abortion, what we've already seen is doctors are confused about what's legal or illegal. They're hesitating, and they're costing women. They're going to cost women's lives, and so it's a far more nuanced subject than we treat it. But everywhere I go, people care about it. It's activating a group of people that have been, I think, maybe disengaged because people are finally going, hey, this is too much. This is authoritarian. This is unacceptable. We don't share these values.
So let's talk a little bit about education. So we have a teacher shortage right now in Texas. I don't know what it's like in the areas that you would be representing. What the teacher shortage looks like is one. Two is that the Republican Party is still like beating the same drum they were beating last year, which was the nothing drum of critical race theory, because they're just making up a bunch of baloney. But so let's talk a little bit about education. Like what are you seeing on the ground in your district? What does the teacher shortage look like? What does it look like for school boards in your area and book bans and critical race theory? Like what are you actually seeing when you meet the folks there? What are they talking about?
They're talking about all those things. I went to a KDISD board meeting in the spring with my daughter, who is going to be a senior. The book ban issue had really taken root in that board. There were a couple students that became widely known kind of activists against that. A lot of division there, a lot of division that persists in KDISD and across the district. I actually think the book bans are less of an issue out in the rural communities. I haven't heard that from those schools or those educators as much. What I do hear from them is the inability to keep quality educators, and that's largely due to what they're paying those educators. They come in, maybe get their first job in one of these smaller districts, and then they leave to go teach somewhere else. And so that's a huge issue for them. CRT, man, I hate even giving that breath because it's so insane. And to me, it's like, you just have to tell people, like, look, what's CRT? And they usually don't know what it is. And then you're like, okay, look, it's a legal lens used in, advanced degree programs. And you just kind of explain it. And they go, oh, and they're like, well, and to be able to say that's not being taught in Texas public schools. Now, there's always going to be a group of people that don't care, they don't believe it, whatever. But when you talk to people and help them sort of realize this isn't even an issue, what I try to center the conversation around education on is how far behind we are in Texas. And we like to be first in all these things, but we're in the bottom 20% on funding per pupil. We're paying teachers $5,000 to $7,000 less compared to the national average. 68-70% of teachers are thinking about quitting. And I'm hearing all these things validated by educators that I talked to. Again, just yesterday in Wharton, talking to a guy, he's like, my daughter's a teacher here, and she's thinking about going and doing something else because she's working 65 hours a week. She's making 35 grand a year. It doesn't make any sense. And it's clearly, to me, if not the most important issue in the state of Texas, it's tied for first. Because it's our future investment we're talking about. And I simply don't understand why we don't recognize that and invest fully in the public education system.
Yes, well, thank you. So we put out an ad today. I don't know if you've seen it. Did you see our ad today?
I don't think I saw the one today, no.
Okay, we have a new ad out on gun violence in schools.
Fantastic. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. Do you all want to watch it really quick? Because since we were supposed to have Kathy on, but Kathy isn't logging on. So do you all want to watch it real fast? It's 30 seconds. Let's watch. Okay, so I'll put it on. Hold on a second. We're just going to wing it today. We're all just going to have a good old time here. And
I'm having a blast. This is fantastic.
Yeah. So, I'm sitting here. You're drinking your Topo Chico. I'm drinking my sparkling water. We're all having a good time. So we put out an ad today, and it was just us sort of fighting back with and just trying to say, look, Republicans, this is where you're taking us and it needs to stop. So here we go. Let me make that bigger. And it's called First Day of School.
Little boys and little girls following the rules, getting ready for the first day of school. Politicians say they make our land safe and free. They're supposed to stand for you and me. Keep our children safe for you and me. Keep our children safe for you and me.
That's brilliant. I hate saying that to that ad, but when you talked about messaging before, and you did this with the abortion ad as well, somehow, sorry, I'm just kind of reacting in real time, but somehow you're finding this edge where, like when it hits, it just hits so emotionally. That stuff like that's going to move the needle. Good job. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's what we're trying to do, because we're just tired of ads that don't fight for everyday Texans. So we're hitting
Yeah.
that the only way we know how, as just regular Texas citizens, because I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office or anything. I'm just a regular mom in Austin, Texas. But yeah, I'm so tired of losing elections when we shouldn't be losing elections. We should be winning elections, because we do great things as Democrats. We really fight really hard, and we have a lot to be proud of. But the thing is that when we're always on the defensive, we don't get to show off as much. So I kind of was like, you know what? I just need to turn this on the Republicans. We need to put them on the offensive a little bit, and just kind of, put their bottoms to the fire, so to speak. So anyway, that's kind of what I was trying to do there. So,
but it's the truth though, right? Because
Yeah.
you put in images there, what so many parents were thinking.
pretty much.
You personified it. When most parents had that in their head and they weren't saying it out loud as they took their first day of school picture, you sort of brought that to life in a compelling way. So yeah, brilliant.
Well, thank you so much. So so Titus, how can we help you with your election? Tell us a little bit about ways where you need help, ways we can help, where we can find you on all of the things, like social media, all the things, and then where are you going to be campaigning next? Just give us the lowdown. Tell us all about
Sure.
you and what we can do to help you out.
Thank you for asking that. As a first-time candidate, there's huge challenges around name recognition, funding, staffing up, all of that. So early on, I knew I wasn't going to outraise Joan Huffman, right? She can self-fund and be fine, or borrow money from Dan Patrick like she did last time. So I'm not going to beat her in fundraising. So what can I beat her at? I can beat her in sweat equity. I can do that for sure. So I've spent a lot of time at events. I'm trailing Beto because while he takes up a lot of oxygen, boy, there's a draft you can fly in behind him and meet a lot of people. So followed him around when he's in the district as well. And then I'm beating the streets, door knocking, starting in earnest this next weekend. Obviously, I've got 8 counties to hit, 950,000 people to potentially reach. No way I can do that. So I've also put a lot of energy online. Pretty active on Facebook and Twitter. I'll put those links in the chat. If you guys want to follow along, that'd be great. Don't take for granted. I don't know if anybody on this call lives in District 17, but even if you don't, when you share stuff online, that stuff it's like compound interest. Like it's just really beneficial. I've had donors from all over the country: California, Minnesota, Ohio, Hawaii, and so when you share that, you just never know who it's going to connect with. So I'd appreciate just helping get the message out in that way. And then I know some people are like, hey, I'll text as many people as you want me to text. I'll call people if you want me to call them. I can do postcards. Those are ways that you could engage no matter where you live. I've got most of the data. It's just slogging through the names and the lists and making the calls. And making those introductions. And so working really hard here in the last 85 days or so, just to get my name in front of as many people as I can. This is really going to be a turnout election too. And so even if I can't persuade people because they learned about Titus Benton, they learned about all of his ideas, they liked his ideas, so they're going to vote for Titus Benton. The work that you all are doing around gun violence, around abortion, the other sort of just GOTV kind of stuff that you all are doing, that's going to create the energy that we need to surprise some people. I'm in a plus 16 district. It was a plus 5 Democratic district. She redrew it. It's a plus 16 Republican district. But I think she's taken some things for granted, many of which we've talked about. I think there's a lot of fed up people that don't want the kind of future that we're headed toward. They see a more equitable and inclusive and just future for Texas. That's what I believe in. And so there's lots of ways we can connect online and get some stuff done together.
Okay, we have Chelsea's putting up your links right now on
wonderful. Thank
your
you.
website. So there's that. Are there any last words, Titus, that you want to share with us? Is there anything that we haven't touched on?
Oh, I mean, I could talk policy all day, but what you just said about hearts still mattering. That's why I got in this. I can remember when I was a kid, I was 9 or 10. I grew up really poor, Southern Missouri. My parents worked hard, but I can remember as a kid when my dad made $125 a week. And even as a kid, I knew that wasn't very much. It was getting cold. It was probably November, something like that. And we got home one night. We pulled up. We had this big U-shaped drive that went behind our old farmhouse. And as we passed by the front of the house, I saw on the porch a box. We parked in the back. I ran in the back door, ran through the house, ran out the front door, grabbed the box, pulled it inside. And I opened the box. And inside the box were 2 brand new winter coats, one for me, one for my sister. Someone, and to this day, I don't know who, in my community, they knew our situation enough. They knew that I needed a new coat. And they went to the store and they bought a coat and they put it in a box. They didn't need any credit. They weren't interested in being bragged about around town. They just left it on the porch. I wore that coat for years. It was my favorite coat. And what I refuse to do is believe that we can't have politics like that sees a need, that meets a need, that does it out of love, not out of fear, that's motivated by hope, not hate, that is moving us forward in a really meaningful and beautiful way. If 25, 50 years from now, we can build back a kind of government that thinks and acts like that, I don't care if I lose every election between now and then. If I can help bring that kind of politics back to the forefront, we got to do it. We got to do it.
Absolutely. Like I always just say, like people say, gosh, Nancy, well, I'll just tell you, someone from Dallas, when the Dallas Morning News wrote about Mothers Against Greg Abbott, they called me an extremist. Yeah. And I just thought, I was kind of laughing because I'm so boring. I don't really extremist, I'm like, really? And here I am with my sparkling water. Like, I don't really, definitely not an extremist. And I just was cracking up. I had this interview, with someone and I was laughing and I just thought, my philosophy is similar to yours, Titus. I think we kind of have a lot of the same philosophy. Love your neighbor. And if we got to the point in society where love your neighbor is extreme, then I just want to throw my hands up in the air and say, God, I give up. Seriously, This is not extreme. This is just caring about each other. And there's nothing more Texan than that. It's just being Texas nice and loving your neighbor.
Yeah. The name of our state means friends. We should be able to figure this out. And I really appreciate it. there's an old, I think it's a Franciscan saying that the best opposition of the bad is the practice of the better. Only an extremist would say that what you are doing is extreme, because what you are doing is so clearly rooted in a set of values, really purposeful, really well organized, really collaborative. And so we're up against a really tough situation here. But the best opposition of that kind of extremism is for us to practice a different kind of ethic and to engage politically in a different kind of way. That does not make us weak. We don't back away from a fight. I'm not suggesting any of that. I'm just saying that if we're rooted in something deeper and more meaningful, like love and service and improving our communities, I just got to believe that in the end, that's going to prevail. I really do.
Me too. Me too, Titus. I wish I lived in your district because I would so totally 100% vote for you.
Well, thank you for this platform. Yes. And I really appreciate it. We're going to keep going hard until the very end, but really grateful for your work. And we'll continue to engage with one another however we can.
That sounds great. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us tonight as we met Titus Benton. And if you have an opportunity, please go to his Facebook page, go to his website, please donate to his cause. And if you have a free weekend, why don't you all show up and just send him a message and ask him if you can show up and do block walking for him. I'm sure he would welcome it. Mothers Against Greg Abbott is going to be endorsing Titus this coming fall in the election, and we're going to be producing some marketing materials with his name on it. So I don't have them done yet, but they're coming, and we are so proud to be endorsing you. So thank you so much for your time.